Palestinian presidential spokesperson. We will keep you across all the reaction. Of course, we're going to be looking to the US to see what...
Am I correct in assuming anyone who trusted the U.S. before this genocide don't trust or like the U.S. anymore? We're showing our ass to the whole world. I mean, not necessarily. I think a lot of people secretly recognize that America being the world police is like really damaging for people who are on the other side, who are experiencing America's actions and America's allies' actions. But they don't really give a shit about it because the current order, the current standing benefits them personally. That's it. I think a lot of people personally recognize that. They just don't care. It's more so about the optics for them. Like, a lot of people recognize, a lot of liberals in America and a lot of people in the Western world recognize that America's actions are truly unconscionable since World War II, since the aftermath of World War II, but it benefits them, so they don't really make too much of a stink about it. Or at least they feel like it benefits them, so they don't make too much of a stink about it. And yet, they still try to maintain this liberal posture that they actually do care about some sense of order. And it's always this... there's always this conflict. When the enemies are voiceless, dehumanized groups of individuals from countries that you don't give a shit about, that's one thing, right? When America's doing the violence and the war in Iraq, Afghanistan, and can portray its enemies successfully as like criminal terrorists that are not defending themselves and their nation against a foreign invasion, but instead these are people who are just like, they want the West to burn and they hate us and they're American phobic or whatever the fuck, which America was successfully able to portray its war on terror, its failure of a war on terror, its destabilizing, incredibly inhumane war on terror as such. It's one thing. People just kind of shut the fuck up and go along with America's imperial ambitions. The situation is a little bit different when it's not just America doing it, but an extension of America doing it. And the extension of America is doing it in broad daylight with American weapons, with American permission, and also doing it in a way that is even more violent than what America has done, which is unimaginable. It's kind of crazy to think that what Israel is doing, if it did it for like 20 fucking years, it would literally be like, what Israel is doing is so completely and wholly unacceptable, because under international law, Israel obviously does not have a right to defend itself in a territory that it already occupies as a belligerent occupier, right? Like, it just does not. It's not like America was already occupying Afghanistan and then chose to bomb the shit out of it, right? It occupied it for 20 years, and it was unconscionable, it was unjust, it was inhumane, a litany of war crimes there, destabilized the entire region. However, even then, the civilian to enemy combatant casualty numbers were nowhere near as bad as what Israel has done in such a short time frame. So ultimately, Israel has been able to basically move the needle in the worst direction, even taking it further than what the United States had done.
The White House say whether this has any impact on Biden's current position of ongoing support for Israel, though of course he has warned repeatedly the Israeli leadership not to go into Hamas territory in Rafah because
the International Court of Justice.
Here is DW News covering it as well.
Has ordered Israel to stop its military offensive in the city of Rafah in southern Gaza. The United Nations top court described the humanitarian situation there as disastrous and ordered Israel to allow unhindered access of aid. Israel has repeatedly said it has the right to defend itself from Hamas militants and is unlikely to comply with the ruling. The court also ordered Israel to report its progress in applying the measures within a month. The ruling was in response to a request from South Africa. Though the court has no way to enforce its decision, the ruling does add further international pressure on the Israeli government. Here is the president of the court, Nawaf Salam.
The court considers that, in conformity with its obligations under the Genocide Convention, Israel must immediately halt its military offensive and any other action in the Rafah governorate which may inflict on the Palestinian group in Gaza conditions of life that could bring about its physical destruction in whole or in part.
Well, let's look at what this might mean with Mark Weller. He's Professor of International Law and International Constitutional Studies at the University of Cambridge in the UK. Welcome to DW.
Is that true, what he said, that the court has no enforcement mechanism? Yeah, it is true. But it doesn't matter because it's still very important, okay? Because the court is a very important part of the international rule-based order, okay? And that is precisely the reason why. Obviously, we have Americans in the court, and like when Professor Sarah H. Cleveland was elected to the International Court of Justice, Secretary of State Blinken in 2021 literally praised the court as a guardian of international law, and Biden said the ICJ was one of humanity's most critical institutions to advance peace around the world. I think that we forget that a lot of this stuff, a lot of diplomacy, a lot of politics is like obviously held together by enforcement mechanisms, violence, imperialism, and that sort of thing. But there is definitely an aesthetic side of this as well. The optics of this has to stick. And I've been chirping about how these institutions simply work at the behest of American interests for decades. And for decades, it has been true, but there is a level, there is a level of I guess pain tolerance that Israel has definitely crossed. That threshold has been crossed. One, partially because Israel is not the United States of America. America gets to do whatever the fuck it wants, but Israel does not have that same leeway, does not have that same bandwidth. Okay. And two, it is an occupier that is doing this to the occupied population. Like, even when you think about another American ally, even if you think about another American ally, imagine if Nazi Germany had the support of the world's strongest superpower, that's Israel. Wake up. Wait, what? What the fuck are you saying? The world's strongest superpower, Israel. Israel's not the world's strongest superpower at all. What the fuck do you mean? Also, Nazi Germany, Israel did not exist back then. He's saying Israel has U.S. support. Oh, he's saying us. Oh, he's saying, imagine if Nazi Germany. I already made that. Okay, I already made that comparison earlier. Yes. By the way, that could have happened. Like, we were kind of close to that. If the business plot had succeeded, we would literally be doing that. We would be living in that world right now. And who knows what would have happened. Anyway. It's not just Pearl Harbor. It was even before then. Like, America was going through its own fascist. America went through its own, like, capital owners having fascist ambitions moment as well.
Israeli citizens suffered terrible atrocities on October the 7th last year, is the government of Israel argued in court that it's taking exceptional measures to minimize harm to the civilian population in Gaza. Today's ruling does seem to indicate that the court sees things rather differently.
Well, Israel is, of course, entitled to the right to self-defense in response.
Dude, I saw comments with thousands of was talking about that Patton "we fought the wrong enemy" quote. Tried to say it was Nazi apology and they got downvoted to hell. We're cool. Oh yeah. This is why I do personally believe that while Nazi Germany, the Third Reich, fell apart and Nazi Germany lost in World War II, fascism absolutely won. Fascism as an ideology, as an ideological tool, was immediately we love taking up the mantle of all of that nonsense. We absolutely have genuinely continued that tradition. Both in our domestic affairs, certainly, and absolutely when it comes to our international enforcement.
To the horrible, atrocious events of the 7th of October. But the right to self-defense is not unlimited, and it can never transgress humanitarian law, the law that supports the dignity of human persons, human beings, in any circumstance, even in war. And the court has now spoken for the third time in just...
You have to remember, it's you're saying, I can't believe that a professor is peddling the Israel has a right to defend itself narrative. This is the German broadcaster. Okay? You're watching the German broadcaster. It is not even remotely shocking that the German broadcaster is doing that. Have you seen what is going on in Germany? I have. You know what? I'm actually going to point to this right now. I wanted to show you something very funny. Nathan Tankis went to the closed screening of The Commandant's Shadow last night, where he had by far the most disturbing experience was the Auschwitz commandant Rudolf Höss's grandson, Kai Höss, and his Christian evangelism for Israel. Okay? If you want to understand where we're at, if you want to understand where Germany's vibes are at, there's two videos I want to show you. One is like the liberal rich Germans also chanting the Germany for Germans only shit. Okay? And the other video is this. Here, let's help you get it a little bit. This is the guy, this is the grandson of the dude who was prominently featured in Zone of Interest. Rudolf Höss. Okay? Let's see what he had to say about Israel.
Have a moment.
Sure, you can, of course.
Or the ramp. Is that better? Yeah, the ramp in the back.
I commend you on taking on your grandfather's legacy, and not legacy, but facing it.
I understand what you're saying.
But I find listening to you very, very concerning. Because it feels to me, as a grandchild of Holocaust survivors, that you've replaced a Nazi anti-Semitism with a Christian evangelical anti-Semitism about defined going to...
I think you're misunderstood.
I don't think I'm misunderstanding.
Well, you know, I love Israel because I know they're God's people.
Yeah, exactly.
And
that is a form of anti-Semitism. Christian evangelical.
He said, I love Israel because they are God's chosen people. You don't understand it. You don't understand.
Anti-Semitism. Have a moment.
Sure.
It was shocking just being in the room with Rudolf Höss's grandson, let alone confronting him. I was my dad's +1, and neither of us realized beforehand. I'm still processing it. There were also many disturbing things about the event, including that it was acquired on October 9th. The panel was very clear this documentary was explicitly meant to counter discussions of Israel's genocide without actually mentioning Palestinians. The movie literally opens and closes with Rudolf Höss's son and grandson in an Israeli desert, with Kai Höss providing Israel voiceover. Compare what Kai Höss had to say to what Billy Graham had to say behind closed doors. Kai Huss knows that he should never say synagogue of Satan about Jews like me who reject Israel, but it's fundamentally the same worldview. It's from the Nixon tapes. Nixon explains how Israeli Jews are the best Jews. They both agree that Jews control the media. Billy Graham explains the synagogue of Satan and how Jews had a stranglehold on Germany, but Hitler went about it wrong.
What does this mean? Does it mean that all Jews are bad? No. But it does mean that most Jews are left-wing, particularly the younger ones like that.
I love that they're literally just repeating exactly what the Nazis believed and basically saying, no, you don't understand. Like, all Jews, they go to Israel and that's fine. And they're great. They're great over there. Okay. Not here. Because when they're here, a lot of them like this commie shit. Okay. And I don't like it. They are literally repeating Judeo-Bolshevism as a propaganda point because they legitimately believe it. Okay? And they're not technically wrong. Historically speaking, yes, Jews have sided with justice. They have, in many instances, been open socialists and communists. So they're not wrong when they say that. Obviously, they're wrong in a monolithic understanding of it, which they're not even particularly saying. It is wild. It is wild. Here, listen. They're radical socialists. They're radical commies.
The only the best Jews actually.
Added to the mountain of evidence that anti-communism is inherently fascist? Of course it is. Wow, I wonder why the Jews in Russia were more in favor of the socialists than the czarists in Russia. Exactly. The best Jews are actually the Israeli Jews.
They are the Israeli Jews. That's right. Because Israel, and the reason Mrs. Megan supports me, which she does, and Diane does too, is for a very fundamental reason. It has nothing to do with, they know these Democratic candidates will be catering to the domestic Jewish vote. But she supports me because she knows the great danger to Israel is Russia. And she knows that in the crisis involving Jordan, that I face the Russians down for. She knows I'm the only one who knows it. She knows that any Democrat paid with the communists to the Russians. See, that's the point. She's talking. We talked about this. Rabin's the same way. Rabin, of course, is a Russian Jew. Boy, does he know it. Now, but however, in this country, we must be under no illusion. You're aware of that, aren't you? You're aware of the fact that in the media, we confront almost a solid block of people. They don't, it isn't the atheist, and he's the point of the thing. They're after him because he took the whole thing on. And it has nothing to do with anti-Semitism. It happens, though, that insofar as the media is concerned, the power of the media, they've got it. They've got it.
He's like, yeah, the Jews control the media. Oh, man. Also, the Nixon Jew count of July 1971 is the name given to then President of the United States, Richard Nixon's attempts to demote and remove Jews from the Bureau of Labor Statistics.
And they're the ones putting out the pornographic stuff and putting out everything.
Directly. By the way, this is exactly, when I say this is verbatim what the Nazis believed, okay, with the exception of Israel because it didn't exist back then, this is word for word what the Nazis believed and said, bar for bar. Now, you might be shocked and say, but that's Richard Nixon. And that seems quite similar to like cultural Marxism and, George Soros propaganda and many other things that right-wingers repeat on a regular basis nowadays. And you would be right, because it is. It is just saying the exact same shit while simultaneously changing the narrative a little bit, massaging it a little bit so that it fits modern sensibilities. Just something to consider.
Bible makes a distinction, Mr. President, between two groups of Jews. One is called the synagogue of Satan.
Yeah. You know it's that our terms is Jewish.
Yes.
So nevertheless, the Bible says there are two different kinds.
There's two different kinds. And those people, in the latter days, it's called the remnant of God's people, which will be Jewish people. And then there's the synagogue of Satan. And nearly all of your religious deceptions in the latter days, what the Bible speaks, latter days will be 1,000 years.
This is cool, man. I just want to also point out another thing. There's a reason why we never look at this kind of stuff, because when we live in America, we have a way to understand Christianity and Christian fundamentalism and separate that from like Christianity across the board. There's a reason why these incredibly powerful people are having this conversation in private, and no one will think that like these are mullahs, okay, who are operating on fundamentalism, and America is demonstrably like a Christian fundamentalist fascist nation. The reason why we don't view this conversation in the same vein as like an Iranian mullah is because of our monolithic understanding, Islamophobia in general, our monolithic understanding of our enemies, or of marginalized communities in general, or, you know, countries that we have dished out a lot of violence to. Whereas in the United States of America, where we live, we of course recognize that this is not representative of every single American. Just so you understand, although all things considered, if you were to operate on the same fucking boundaries that you, the same smoke that you have for, I guess, Islam, the Islamic world in general, as an Iranian, are you saying that the mullahs are good? You have to literally be the most delusional person on the planet if you are thinking that I'm saying the mullahs are good when comparing them to Richard Nixon. You are basically reinforcing the exact same point that I've made time and time again. A lot of people operate on the boundaries of, well, you know, America's good ultimately. No, when I compare a foreign adversary to America, that is the worst comparison I could make for said foreign adversary. Okay? I'm saying it's bad. I'm saying that in many instances, it is no different. And in this circumstance, it is no different than the Islamic fundamentalism demonstrated by those in positions of power in the Muslim world. As an Iranian, yes, but also liberalism aesthetics require one to hide the nutty parts of religion. Mullahs don't hide it because they're not liberal. Yes.
What they call the synagogue of Satan. In other words, they are energized by a supernatural power called the devil. This is what the Bible teaches, whether you believe it or don't believe it. This is the biblical teaching, and this is what I believe. And I believe that you have, they have a strange brilliance about them.
Oh. What the fuck was that? These Jews, they have a strange brilliance about them.
They have a strange brilliance about them. Oh. They're smart, and they are energized, in my judgment, by a supernatural power.
Well, also they do something else, but they're not only smart, they stick together.
And you see, of course Hitler didn't. They had a stranglehold on Germany, on the banking of Germany, on everything in Germany, and the media. They had the whole thing.
That's so funny. Oh God. It's like the Japanese believing in Jew magic, so they wanted the Jews to on their side. It's a little bit of column A, column B, where they're like, they're basically saying that like fascist Jews in Israel are the good Jews, and the anti-fascist Jews here in America are satanic Jews that control the media and degenerate Western supremacist. The Western culture and Western civilization. So for the domestic Jews, they have the same exact smoke that Hitler had. It's like if the Havara Agreement actually turned into reality, basically. Okay? That's it. That's like that is basically the mentality that they have. If the Havara Agreement worked and Hitler was like, yeah, you know what, instead of like killing all the Jews. We're just going to ship them forcibly to Israel. Okay, then in that situation, it's like basically the exact same attitude that these guys have, because they're like, our domestic Jews are degenerate pornographers that are, doing unlimited immigration into America in an effort to displace white Americans, white supremacist Americans, right? So we got to ship them off so they can all become fascist Jews in Israel and then be the good kind of Jew. If you want to know more about Nixon's takes on Jewish people, here it is. The Jews are born spies. Less than a week after the U.S. Supreme Court dealt a blow to the Nixon administration and sanctioned further publication of the Pentagon Papers, President Nixon and a senior White House aide discussed the role of race and religion as drivers of espionage. This conversation stands as one of the cruder examples of Nixon's prejudices and his willingness to air them among confidants. Wait, hold on.
All the Jews have vanished close by, except there's this strange malignancy now seems to creep among them. Radicalism. I can imagine how the fact that Ellsworth must be teared whole like Henry to pieces or garment. Just like the Rosenbergs and all that. That just has to kill them. You feel horrible about it. Could be a guy by the name of Smith. Very good. Would have been a Rosenstein that changed his name. It is right. It's always an Ellsberg or everyone's a Jew. Ellsberg Jew, Rosenberg Jew.
Why is it that you find what he's saying amusing? What do you mean? Like, what am I supposed to do? It's psychotic. It is literally verbatim 1-to-1 Nazi shit. It is like, I don't know what to say about it. It's basically a further confirmation of everything I say all the fucking time. That Republicans have basically continued that exact same fascist tradition, okay? Which, like, I would say even Democrats as well. Like, the American government broadly has continued the same fucking fascist tradition, okay? It's just that the aesthetics are different.
But there are bad just so that proves.
They're playing Name the Jew. The problem is the they that we're talking about here is the motherfucking president at the time. Okay? Hasan really seems to resent the United States. Oh my God, dude. That's your takeaway? What is it that you think you know better than the president of that time? Are you fucking... Bro, this is literally like being like, well, Adolf Hitler, do you think you know better than he did at the time? The fuck do you mean? I know better than the president of this time too. Please tell me you're trying to bait like literally 12 minutes before the top of the hour. You cannot be defending Richard Nixon in the chat, right? Especially in like one of the surprisingly even more indefensible moments of Richard Nixon. Like this is uniquely bad even for Richard Nixon.
Very interesting thing. So few of those who engage in espionage.
Okay, these guys are baiting, right? There's a lot of like weirdo fucking anti-Semites in here today. What's happening? Like, what's going on? There's like hella people in here that are just like, oh, well, was he wrong though? Yes, dude. Yes, he was. He was wrong. No, I don't think that like Jews are monolithic in their approach, or that they control the media, or that they're all fucking descendants of the synagogue of Satan. Yeah, why did these pigs say that the German Jews had a complete stranglehold over a number of industries, meaning they were the capitalists, and at the same time claim Judeo-Bolshevism existed? It doesn't have to make sense. Our enemy is both weak and strong at the same time. It just, it is. I'll bring it back to a place that you guys understand. You know how a lot of my haters will literally be like, "Oh, Hasan never donates," right? And then, but I do. So then when I do, they'll turn around and say, "Oh, he just did it for PR. He did it for clout." It's because the reason why, like the foundational disagreement, has nothing to do with my actions. It's just pure resentment. They're just trying to make it stick by any means necessary. And that's how anti-Semitism is as well. In this case, they're both simultaneously saying Jews are, defenders of Judeo-Bolshevism, defenders of like socialist, communist, moral degeneracy and rot and yada, 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 while simultaneously saying they also control all the media and also all of the banks. It doesn't have to be true, and it is not. It's just a way to make your resentment stick. Also, the Synagogue of Satan sounds badass as fuck. I'm not gonna lie. Like, it does low-key kind of go hard. I don't know why they did that. I don't know why they were saying this behind closed doors, but like it sounds incredible. It sounds dope. But that's like, that's besides the point. I know that they didn't imply it in a dope way, but it is kind of cool to be like, yeah, we are descendants of Synagogue of Satan. But yeah. Ultimately, it doesn't come from like real valid. It doesn't come from real valid anger and real valid criticisms. It has nothing to do with that at all. It's more so post hoc rationalizations for why you carry this resentment to begin with. You have detailed Jews as the outgroup. So now you will say that they are both capital owners who control all of the different institutions and instruments of capitalism, and you will also simultaneously say they want socialism and they are actually anti-capitalist. Both. Anyway, let's continue.
Very few of them become communists. If they do, they're likely to get an Angela Davis. They're more of the activist type.
As a matter of fact, very few of them become communists. If they do, they're more likely to get into Angela Davis. They're more the activist type, and they throw bombs and this and that. And
they throw bombs and this and that. But the Negroes, if you ever notice, they're anti-Negro spies. They're not intellectual enough. Not smart enough. They're not smart enough.
A little bit of anti-black white supremacist resentment there too. You got to put that in there.
Spies, the Jews are born spies. You know somebody they're just in it, up to their necks. The basic deviousness that also inherits.
Bro, this is literally just Hitler, okay? Like, I'm not even kidding. Like, I have to show you some of this fascist propaganda. Like, I need you to... Here. Okay. Here are some stereotypes and canards, okay? Modern economic anti-Semitism is a double helix of intersecting paradigms. The first associating the Jew with paupers and savages, and the second conceiving of Jews as conspirators, leaders of a financial cabal seeking global domination. A World War II era Slovak propaganda poster exhorts readers not to be a servant of the Jew. Foxman describes the 6 facets of canards used by proponents of economic anti-Semitism. All Jews are wealthy. Jews are stingy and greedy. Powerful and wealthy Jews control the world. Judaism emphasizes profit and materialism. Jews may cheat non-Jews. Jews use their wealth and power to benefit their own kind. Summarizes the myth as Jews control the banks, the money supply, the economy, the businesses of the community, of the country, of the world. He uses illustrations, many slurs, and proverbs in several different languages, suggesting that Jews are stingy, greedy, miserly, or aggressive bargainers. I want to see here. One form of economic anti-Semitism in the Middle Ages was a mass of legal restrictions imposed on the occupations and professions of Jews. Local rulers and church officials ruled many professions to the Jews, pushing them into the marginal occupations considered repugnant, such as tax and rent collecting and money lending, but tolerated them as a necessary evil, usury being a sin in both Christianity and Islam. Catholic doctrine then held that money lending for interest was a sin and forbade the Christians. Not being subject to that restriction, Jews dominated this business. The Torah and the later sections of the Hebrew Bible criticize usury, but interpretations of biblical prohibition vary. Since few other occupations were open to them, Jews were motivated to take up money lending. That was said to show Jews were usurers, which then led to many negative stereotypes and propaganda. The natural tension between creditors, typically Jews, and debtors, typically Christians, were added to the social, political, religious, and economic strains. More dangerous was lending to the monarchs of Europe, which enabled them to finance their endless wars and projects. Some monarchs would revenge on repayments, often accusing their Jewish moneylenders of various crimes. The nobility would also borrow large sums to maintain their lavish lifestyles. Peasants who were forced to pay their taxes to Jews could personify them as people taking their earnings and remain loyal to the lords on whose behalf the Jews worked. Also present in the Middle Ages was the insistence by European sovereigns that the Jews belonged to them in a peculiar way, different from that of their other subjects, which was evident in examples of the English legal code, which portrayed the kings as tutor and defender of the Jews and of the Jews as his possessions, writing that for those Jews and all that they possess belonged to the kind as if they were his private property. On the 19th century, Jews came so closely associated with capitalism that some even viewed the Jews as the creator of capitalism. According to Muller, those who embraced capitalism tended to be sympathetic to the Jews, and those who rejected capitalism tended to be hostile to the Jews. Except the irony, of course, is Karl Marx himself, being a Jewish person. Another anti-Semite in the chat. Nixon just spitting for real. Because many Jews are employed in occupations that Marx considered non-productive, he singled out Jews for particular criticism and blamed Judaism for the exploitation and alienation of workers. This is why they say Karl Marx is an anti-Semite, despite being of a Jewish background himself. Moses Mendelssohn argued that the contrary, that commercial activity was just as valid as beneficial as manual labor. Many a merchant, while quietly engaged at his desk and blah, 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 blah. Marx concluded that Judaism was responsible for the alienation of many Jewish workers. In his 1844 work on the Jewish question, Marx distinguished between the Sabbath Jew and the everyday Jew. Marx argued that, particularly speaking, everyday Judaism was a commercial practice, not a theology. According to Perry, Marx believed that Jews are the embodiment of capitalism, money system in action, and the creators of all its evil consequences on humanity, which is the reason why they say he is a anti-Semite, which once again is ironic because of this part, which is the most important part of this conversation. Jewish Bolshevism is an anti-Semitic and anti-communist canard that is based on the claim that Jews have been the driving force behind or are disproportionately involved in communism, sometimes more specifically Russian Bolshevism. The expression was the title of a pamphlet, The Jewish Bolshevism, and became current after the 1917 October Revolution in Russia, featuring prominently in the propaganda of the anti-Bolshevik white forces during the Russian Civil War. The idea spread worldwide in the 1920s with the publication and the circulation of the Protocols of the Elders of Zion that was popularized by Jewish ancestry of many leading Bolsheviks, most notably Leon Trotsky, during and after the October Revolution. Daniel Pipe says that primarily through the Protocols of Elder Zion, the whites spread these charges to an international audience. James Webb wrote that it is rare to find an anti-Semitic source after 1917 that does not stand in the debt to the white Russian analysis of the revolution. The label Judeo-Bolshevism was used in Nazi Germany to equate Jews with communists, implying that communism served Jewish interests and or that all Jews were communists. Remember, they literally simultaneously were claiming Jews control the money supply and the global order and all the banks and all the media, and also simultaneously saying Jews were all communists and were in control of the labor force and were responsible for any kind of revolutionary sentiment, which they did not like. This is precisely the reason why the first people that were placed in concentration camps were not, many of them were Jewish, by the way, were not placed on the virtue of Judaism, of being of Jewish descent, but instead placed there because they were trade unionists, socialists, and communists. So the idea that like Nazi Germany was ever actually socialist, national socialist, was ridiculous from the jump. Out of the Bolshevik revolutionaries, only 1 to 2 was of Jewish descent. I mean, is it so hard for the Nazis to look this up? I don't think you